DOTE.
Welcome to an advanced tutorial in the How to Transcribe using DOTE series. And this tutorial is going to focus on how we can create a transcript from scratch that's following the Mondadian conventions that we support. The Jeffersonian conventions are a lot simpler, a lot easier, and so we're going to see how we can also create a new transcript in a new project from scratch that's going to be following some of the conventions, and see how DOTE can help us do that. So to get started, we see here the Lego demo project, which has already a fairly complex transcript using the Mondadian conventions for the first 30 seconds or so. We're going to forget that and try and start again from scratch with a more simpler version, just to see how DOTE can manage this. So what we want to do is create a new project, and here I've already given it a name, Mondadian convention version. Transcript name is just main, and it's going to be in this location, my DOTE projects. So if I create that, I notice I've chosen here the Mondadian system because you need to make a decision about that for every transcript. So I'm going to say create, and now we have a blank new project ready to load up some media in our media manager and then to start transcribing. So first thing to do is get some media. So what we're going to do is add a file, and we're going to find here, once we look in the location of where the main demo project is, we'll see where the videos are, and we're going to choose one of these, and we'll choose two of them just to get started, and we'll mainly focus on one. We're going to focus on this one here, which is the table in which the group is trying to reconstruct the Lego model that one of them can see behind a hidden screen. So I'm going to open that one. It's going to import it, because every project has to have its own media, and it is a 360. If it's got the 360 inside the name in any way, then it will detect it's 360. If not, then you have to make that manually. And then we'll add another, which is maybe a more general view using the Insta360 Pro, which is a camera in the middle of the room. So we'll add that one. At the moment we'll just focus on the first camera. So if I close this, what we should see happen is after a short while a waveform should be created. And we can continue. I can see I can zoom in here while it's creating that. It's all done in parallel. And let's say we want to focus here on these three at this table, and particularly this person here, this woman here, because she's the one who's going to be running backwards and forwards. Let's just say we want to focus on her and some of her multimodal actions, and then start to add to that. So it's just going to make an attempt to get going. So now we have things set up. We could start to use video cues if we want, but we're not going to do that at this point. So we'll just leave it set like this. And we could open a secondary video if we wanted to focus in on somebody, for example, and we'll maybe just set that up for now. Let's say we want to really focus in on her and see her separately from the others. And that's being saved as well. I'll just close that for now. So now we've set up possibilities. If we go to this waveform, we want to maybe zoom in a bit, so when we start playing, as you can see, we've just got the very beginning here. He's about to say something. There he is. The researcher is just saying something to get started. The game started. So let's focus on what he's saying and then what she is saying or doing, and see if we can begin to add. And we'll make decisions as we go along. We could go and, of course, in settings. If we look in settings, we'll see we've got a bunch of Mondadian system symbols. These are the ones I have set up. There is a core base set of them, which is included with any DOTE installation, but you can add here your own ones and delete them and reorder them just by picking them up. For example, here I can move this one up further if I think it's something I really want to use a lot, and we're going to be using some of these symbols. The default transcription conventions are Jeffersonian, but that's in general every time you make a new transcript, but in this case we have chosen Mondadian. And we've got a margin. You can see there's a faint line here. It's a margin at 70 characters. and we've got some idea of font and width, etc. And we also have these installed, which means that we can do a better job of creating the waveform. So everything's ready to go there. We could also look at the transcript options and see where it's located. We can open that folder. We also see some idea of the editor and the width. We can change that transcript by transcript to a different setting. And it's got Mondadian. And maybe what we should do to start is, this is in Danish, maybe we need to add a translation subtier. So I'm going to say ENG and add that. And that means it will be automatically created every time we have a new speaker. We're not going to do any glossing. What we're going to be adding is these action subtiers, and we'll come back to that to be able to add some of those. So let's close that. And here you would want to add metadata to get started. So we'll just say metadata, and that could be anything on any line, and the lines that are continuous that has a double slash, forward slash, and a space is considered to be metadata. And then we can start the transcript. So we're ready to go from here, and let's see what happens. I'm going to use a certain key combinations to play and return. So we've got, you can see she glances over to him after she's looking in this direction here, and then she returns to look at her. So we've got something to do with her gaze to monitor. Her body is, she's lifting her weight slightly. Maybe it's not so significant, but we could mark that if we wished about her body. But let's focus on gaze and more substantial movements. So there we've got the beginning. So let's choose some, and it's also a good idea here in the metadata to maybe include what you're going to be encoding in the transcript options for the named subtier types, what they actually are. So we're going to choose R1 is the researcher, so I'm just going to put that first, and then I'm going to add another element of this, and then we're going to call these P1, P2, P3. So let's just start with P2. That's the woman running. She's the one in the middle who's going to be running. And then for her, we're probably going to have to choose, as I said, P2 slash, and then this is the convention with a forward slash, then the action that's involved, and let's say it's gaze. And we're going to choose a symbol for that. And just to match the original, the transcript that we've included in the demo project, that's going to be a $sign, which, let me find that one. There's the $sign. So there's an idea of what that one is, and maybe we will also add her body, so P2 body when it's relevant, and then for that we're going to choose the symbol, the @ symbol. So that's just getting us started. We might want to add more later, like what R1 and his movements and his gaze, but let's just start with those. We're interested particularly in P2. And in the Mondadian system, you as either during speech, in what we call a neighborhood, in the head of a neighborhood, there's speech. Then action subtiers and other subtiers can be added to show alignment, in temporal alignment with that speech as it's unfolding, or it can be a series of timed intervals. So to get this one started, we have got R1. Now, as soon as I start typing, this is the first instance of somebody. It doesn't recognize it yet, but we have to do a colon and then a tab, and then he's saying something like tre or so. Display that. That's roughly, if I choose it here. So there you can hear, I'll deselect that. That's the tre or so up to here. And then he's going to continue on, so we'll just say, okay, he continues on the next line. But now we have R1. Maybe we need a translation subtier. We're not going to get it here, but now we know that R1 and DOTE can parse this as being a speaker or a participant. As soon as I type, it's going to make suggestions now. So I actually want a subtier here, and that is 3. And then, so he's setting up the countdown. And now he's going to carry on. So R1, and now we get a suggestion, and now we get the full autocomplete because now it's picked up that R1 is a participant, and then he's going to say, so we'll carry on from here.
Når jeg siger go, så starter det.
Okay, so that's basically saying when I say go, so we're going to start. So here we go. That's in Danish. This is no, yeah, and this is in a dialect. See, and we're just going to do it like this. We're not going to pay attention to pauses in this particularly. So start of the, you'll see stuff flashing up and all the time because that's DOTE is trying to give help whenever it's necessary. You can just ignore it if it's not relevant. And that we need the, oops, I put that of course in the wrong. If I just select that and delete it and move it up, then so it's when I say go, then we start. So there we've got the basics. Now we might want to start adding now, okay, what's she doing during this? And maybe we need to put in some sync codes. We're going to put one here, which is when he says try also.
Hey, altså.
And then the next utterance is coming up here.
Når jeg siger go, så starter vi.
And then there's a pause of some type there, so we'll just put a marking of a pause. I'll just do it like this at the moment because, well, of course this looks like a micro pause, but if I want to measure that, then I could just click here and loop this, and we don't hear anything. Let's say it's 0.4. We might not be that interested in that. So there's roughly the pausing of that, and then he's going to say something else. So let's just deselect that, and he says, are you ready? So we're just going to do that one. We get the autocomplete. Klar, so are you ready in plural in Danish, and I'm just going to leave it without any marking of prosody or intonation. So are you ready? So there we've got a sort of Jefferson version, and maybe I'll just add that. It's roughly about here. And she's going to start talking very faintly. We can't hear her very well on this on the sound that's coming from this video, which is the camera on the table. But she does have a wireless mic, but we're not going to focus on that. Now let's say we want to see, if we go back to here, is she's looking this direction. So what you need to do in Mondada is add a subtier here, and it's best to really make neighborhoods distinct, we feel. So here I've added in new lines to really make it clear that these are separate neighborhoods where all sorts of stuff can happen. So now we need to start setting up some subtiers, and we've already figured out that we'd like to have P2 gaze with $1. Now we could, rather than having to type that every time, we can actually tell DOTE that that's what our decision we've made. So here we add who's the speaker or participant, so P2, and what is the tier? It's going to be gaze, and we can choose a symbol. We can also have an autocomplete because we'd like to always have reminded every time we create something involving P2 that it will be auto-completed for us. And the symbol that we want is a $sign, so we can see through here, there's the $sign. And now we've selected that. When we look again, you'll see it's no longer there because it's now obviously unique to this subtier. And we have to add another one now, which is P2, and body. Let's just say body, which is about body movement, things like that. And that one we want to have is the @ And now if we look, that's also gone. So obviously symbols like these have to be unique for each named subtier type. And now if we close, nothing seems to have changed, but now things will be suggested to us, and in this case we need to set up at the beginning of the transcript using the Mondada conventions. Well, where is R1? Sorry, I've putting R1. I actually want to have P2, so we need a P2 here, and now you can see it says body and gaze. We've never used P2, but because we've entered it, then it's given us an idea of what those could be. And let's say we want to have her gaze at this point, and now that's completed, that's subtier. And when you come to export and publish it to RTF or subtitle, then all of this will be removed and can be formatted nicely if you have the Pro version. And here 3 and then we'll start with and we have to use a double angle bracket, the chevron, which says this has continued on from prior from this transcript, that she is gazing, and maybe she's gazing over at the other group. It's hard to see here, but she is gazing over here. So let's say gaze at group 2, so G2. G1 is this group. And let's say that continues. And notice there's all of these help here is being given. There's a missing action continuation because this says the gaze has started beforehand. It continues on this neighborhood and continues past this neighborhood to some future neighborhood which we haven't specified yet. And as soon as we do, then this error will disappear. So it's a reminder that, hey, something, this is carrying on beyond the transcript, then you should be doing something different. If not, then you need to complete it somewhere to show the continuation. So let's see what happens next as we play this. So we're at this point here, and notice there, she's just shifted her gaze. We could look, it's roughly, it's just here. As he finishes, she turns as he's about to say. So it's roughly, it continues until up to here, and let's say she changes gaze just as he's about to speak. We'll just do that for here. We could say, well, no, it's slightly before. We could add in a micro pause here where there is something, and say, well, no, it's actually at the beginning here, just before he starts speaking again. So continues on. Now we need to add, using the system, the conventions, P2 again, and gaze. And if we're not sure what the symbol is, because we haven't used it yet, because when it isn't the convention that you would use it at this point, with the continuation before the transcript, but now on we do need to keep using it. So let's just say we want to do it here, and if we do Control Enter, it suggests the $, which is the symbol, as you see up here, for that subtier, as well as a bunch of other possible auto-completions. So let's say we want that one. If we go up to here and also do the same, it's also going to say, well, you've got that subtier, maybe you need this alignment symbol. So if we say yes, now we have the alignment symbols. But unfortunately, as you can see here, there's a missing marker. Because at line 9 it says it carries on, and this is saying it's starting fresh. So actually we need to add here that there's a continuation. And now we see things are not quite aligned. It's saying, do you want to realign? And we'll say yes. Now it's realigned. So this basically says the gaze starts before this, looking at G2, continues on to this point, and then she switches gaze to, and we could say if we want to write it out, at R1. And that continues on. We're not sure, does it continue on beyond what he's saying later, or so now we're going to see, so we'll play. So it does, she does start to change on about so. So she's gone to look at her by the time it gets to so. So we're going to have to add something in here, and what is it going to be? An alignment symbol. Yep. And this carries on, so gaze at R1, it continues, and then there's around here there's a retraction of the gaze and a shift. And then what symbol do we need? We need this symbol. And now that gaze is at P3, which continues so sometime in the future. So she's looking at her, there's a smile. We might want to add things about the head and the face as another subtier if we wish to. But let's just say we're focusing on gaze shifts. So she's gazing at G2 and shifts to gaze at R1, and then shifts to gaze at P3. Okay, and that continues on. This carries on. So it's still, she's gazing at P3 and she's about to say something. So in terms of her body, she's not doing anything yet. We could add here at this point, okay, what about mutual gaze? Maybe we're interested in that she, P3 here, is maybe looking at her, and there returns to him. So maybe not, maybe she's looking at him there. So we could add this. What we need to do is add, say, here, for example, just for our own benefit to have it, but you don't have to do this. P3 equals woman in white, and P3 gaze. We're going to choose the copyright symbol. So I'm just going to select that from here. I kind of don't know how to get that on the keyboard. There's the copyright symbol. So we've just chosen that as one of the symbol. So what we need to do now is add here P3. We don't see it here because we haven't added it as a subtier. So let's just delete that. We have, of course, to put it as a subtier first. We're going to add P3, and this is going to be gaze. Actually, we do want this one to be auto-completed as well, both of these. But this is going to be the copyright symbol there. And now we've assigned unique symbols where the autocomplete is only on P2s, not P3. And now we'll see that if P2 is going to say something, we'll see what happens in a moment. Now we have here the opportunity to use P, and it's being recommended here, gaze. What is the symbol? Well, we don't need one yet because it's gaze at R1. And that's continuing on. She's gazing at R1, so let's just see now.
Og så når jeg siger go, så
And there, the flick of the hair and our eyes go to her in mutual gaze. So we can see where that happens.
så starter
It's
go, så
it's right here. You can see. You can use a frame jump forward and backwards, one frame at a time. So maybe here's the changeover, and I'm going forward, and maybe the mutual gaze, there's the smile. So maybe mutual gaze is around here, which if I play,
så starter
so still it's roughly around the same point here as the mutual gaze arrives. So that means we need to add it here, P3 gaze, and it's continuing on until, let's say, the same point here. There's the continuation, and the symbol is, it's the copyright. We also need it up here. It doesn't always autocomplete. It depends if it recognizes it as some sort of part of a word nearby. So if we add a space, it should work. No, if we add, now there we are. There's this copyright symbol, and that means gaze at P2 continuing. So I notice it's not aligned. It's suggesting we do an alignment. So now everything is aligned. So what we see now is these multimodal subtiers, which we've named, and they have signed symbols. And now everything is fine, except that these continue on somewhere, and we haven't yet done that. So this is just a temporary error about continuation. So now they're looking at each other, and if it carries
så
on.
starter vi.
Now she looks down just there. So
Er I klar?
it's just before. In that gap, that 0.4 seconds, she looks down. And she's looking at the blocks. Possibly because she has looked down at her microphone, looking at the direction of gaze shift. So it's roughly about there. So we could say that's in the pause, maybe after, let's say, 0.1 of a second. We'll just say that. And that means in this pause we need to start breaking this up into 0.3 and 0.1 makes 0.4. Let's just do it that way. And this is now it's got no speaker name, but it means we haven't yet done anything with this. What we need to do now is add the subtier, and then everything will sort itself out. In this case, we're getting a shift in the gaze of P3, so we'll choose P, and if we just do PG, you'll notice we'll get all those with G's in, and we'll guess the gaze one, we want that one. The symbol, well, we've forgotten it. Oh, if we do an autocomplete on Control Enter, it says, okay, is it this symbol we want? Yep. And we also want to have it in here, and this is where it happens. There we are, and now you see it sorting itself out. It's not yet aligned. It's actually a continuation, and now notice that little error has gone away. and then it actually let's say looks down, and that carries on until whenever. Could finish very quickly, we don't know. And if we do a fixed realignment, then those are now realigned. But P2's gaze is still at her, so nothing has changed there. And let's see what happens. There, she's looked up. So, and now she started talking. And let's just say P2 has started talking here. So let's do an autocomplete. Now notice we're getting all of this as well auto-completed, because we've chosen that in the transcript options here to be auto-completed. We don't actually need that because nothing is shifting yet, though she is going to be doing some running in a moment. So let's just say we eliminate that and say, well, she is saying something, but I can't quite hear what it is, and so we don't know what it is in the translation. So we can type that, and it's as she's saying that, her eyes are just going to come up. She's just started talking, and so gaze is coming to reach about here as she's starting to speak. So in here we need to have then P3 is going to be shifting her gaze, and it's roughly exactly as she starts talking after he said, are you ready? And what's the symbol? We need to have this symbol. It's going to be overlapping here, and it's a continuation, so we need to continue. Notice that's resolved itself, and notice this one here hasn't yet resolved itself because she hasn't yet shifted her gaze. She's going to do that when she starts running, obviously, or as he does the countdown. And things are not aligned anymore, so we can just do a nice realignment. Translation subtiers don't get realigned. You have to do that manually, because it really depends on how you want to set up your translation. They're not necessarily matching in any way what's happening on the main speaker tier. So now we have that gaze continuing at P3, so this is P3's gaze. P3 gaze shifts here, looks down, and then looks up again at gaze at P2, continuing. Okay, so now we're beginning to build up a picture of how P2's gaze is shifting according to talk and non-talk, how P3's gaze is responding and achieving mutual gaze using the conventions, and DOTE is helping us. As you can see here, it says missing action, continuation, missing action, continuation. And if we had accidentally missed something, like dropped out a symbol, then it's going to give you us warnings. So there's at least 20 different types of warnings that can be given. And I think we're pretty much on the way now. What we could do is add a lot more to maybe, as you're going to see in a moment, she's going to start running. So
3, 2, 1, go.
And there she goes. So she starts running. So down a bit later, we're going to need to have the body subtier coming in as she runs to the other side of the room. Obviously gaze here, the gaze is tracking her as she runs over, so we're going to see shifts of gaze of the two other participants, so we need to use those subtiers, because that's the phenomena that's emerging that's of interest to us, is how she manages, and the others in the group manage her exit and re-entrances to doing the group work on trying to solve the puzzle in front of them on the table. In this case, we've been marking R1 because he's dictating instructions, but he doesn't do too much after that. So he will fade away. We may want to look at his body and gaze to say, is it relevant? And then we'd have to add that here to the subtiers, and we're going to end up with quite a lot of subtiers to be able to cover that. So DOTE manages to allow us to specify things in advance. You can see here with what we call the name subtier types. It helps us with inside neighborhoods in order tracking. It helps between neighborhoods and across the whole transcript about onsets and offsets of particular alignments. And it gives up to 20 different errors and warnings about things that can go wrong to help you, which is very easy to make mistakes. Just to finish up, what we can do is take a look, what does this look like, and if it's exported as RTF, and then we can look at the original one to see how complex that is and how the subtier types were set up. So if we go to export to RTF, you can see, okay, well, there are some errors. What we could do is fix that. Let's say we had finished here, we need to actually add saying continues on beyond the transcript, and we could do that here. Then that's showing that these are starting before and finishing after our current transcript, and everything is now nice and dandy. And so if we go again to export to RTF, now we see we have in the free version you would have the line numbers on every line, and we have the subtier types and the neighborhoods. Everything is there, it's all parsed in color, and everything is nicely aligned, and we can export that, and we could make change. You can see it's got to have some sort of gap here in order so that things can work, so everything stays in alignment. And we could get rid of the coloring if we wanted. But if you've got the Pro version, then you'll be able to add some better line numbers. So let's add this, so only consecutive of a line of a speaker are included. And let's say we want to get rid of the tier names and use the convention of capitals lowercase like this, and that we want some highlighting. And now you can see we have the first neighborhood. R1 is at the head of the neighborhood, and everything is bounced off that. There are no symbols to align in this. It just says beforehand and continuing, so we don't have any symbols, but then you can see them all appearing. Everything has been aligned as it should be, and the translations are in italics as they should be, and in a lower grayscale font and color, and the subtiers are named. And why we do this, of course, is to match the conventions, whereas if we left the tier names there, that actually specifies much more clearly what they are, so which you have to recover from this version. And so in a way I prefer this version, but it gets a bit ugly with so much text to parse that we can eliminate them if you wish and have it in a much simpler format, which is redundant in the sense that it gets rid of lots of information which might be unnecessary, but it actually often gets rid of too much information, so it's hard to actually follow and read in very, very complex in a neighborhood which has multiple subtiers, like up to 10 subtiers. Now that's it, that's done. We could use checkpoints to keep saving and adding, and you'll see we don't really have anything. If we look in there, these are all the changes that are made. I haven't made any checkpoints. But let's go back and take a look at the original free demo one, and here you'll see quite a lot more subtiers, and you can see a lot more is being tracked going on in these initial things that we were tracking. Also her hand, what it's doing, flicking the hair, what R1 is doing, gaze shifts, and if we look at options, you'll see it's all been coded here into all of these subtiers with these symbols assigned. No autocomplete setup in this one, but we have the English translation. So that means DOTE can track these a very, very complex set of symbols across multiple neighborhoods, and make sure there's consistency, and that's hopefully given you a better understanding how to get started with a Mondadian transcript. You have to learn, of course, the conventions, and so you'd have to read the version 5.0.1 of the conventions that are online, and interpret those to be able to decide, to make decisions about how to order your subtiers, how to name them, and how continuity is made consistent across the whole transcript. Continuity in subtier type and in alignment. Okay, so that's quite a lot of stuff to learn, and we'll finish there and take a look at the extra tutorials on subtier types and the difference between conventions of Mondadian, Jeffersonian. Take a look at the help guide online, and you should be able to slowly learn how to do a better Mondadian transcript.